The moment Mark Walker's hand connected with Rohan Mehta's face, time seemed to fracture. The conference room fell into a silence so dense it could suffocate. Droplets of blood traced a crimson path down Rohan's cheek, each drop a testament to years of suppressed hatred, systemic racism, and corporate brutality. 30 executives watched, some in shock, others with a cold, calculating indifference that spoke volumes about the unspoken rules of power. What drives a human being to violence? What invisible lines of hatred run so deep that they transform professional disagreement into a moment of primal, uncontrollable rage? The scene wasn't just about a punch. It was about generations of unresolved tensions, about privilege and marginalization, about a corporate world that had long pretended to be colorblind while maintaining intricate systems of exclusion. Rohan didn't move. He didn't wipe the blood. His eyes, dark, intelligent, unbroken, locked with Mark's, creating a moment of electric tension that seemed to draw every breath from the room. 30 seconds earlier, they had been discussing a multimillion-dollar project proposal. 30 seconds later, everything had changed. This is not just a story about racism. This is not just a story about corporate dynamics. This is a story about humanity's most profound struggle, the battle between our learned prejudices and our capacity for genuine understanding. The conference room at Global Horizon Technologies wasn't just a space. It was a microcosm of society, a battlefield where systemic racism wore tailored suits and spoke in metrics and quarterly reports. Mark Walker, 42, third-generation executive, with skin the color of old money and eyes that had never been forced to truly see beyond his own narrow world, stood breathing heavily. His hand, which moments ago had struck with violent precision, now trembled almost imperceptibly. Rohan Mehta, 35, a Harvard MBA with a portfolio that could make most executives weep, represented something far more dangerous than any physical threat. He represented change. He represented a future where merit, not melanin, determines success. Imagine a world where your entire professional existence is reduced to the color of your skin, where every achievement is viewed through a lens of suspicion, where excellence is not recognized, but somehow always requires additional validation. This was Rohan's reality. This had been his entire professional journey. The executives around them, some white, some brown, some black, represented a complex tapestry of corporate America. They were witnesses, complicit in their silence, participants in a system they simultaneously condemned and perpetuated. Global Horizon Technologies, a name that suggested unlimited potential, yet was built on foundations of systemic exclusion. Hey, incredible listeners! If this story is already sending chills down your spine, make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to witness is more than a narrative. It's a revolution disguised as a corporate drama. The punch was just the beginning. The real battle was about to unfold. Days before this explosive moment, nothing had suggested such violent potential. Mark and Rohan had been professional antagonists, their interactions marked by thinly veiled hostility, passive-aggressive emails, strategic undermining during presentations. But something had been brewing, a tension more combustible than any corporate strategy, more dangerous than any market disruption. Their first encounter months ago had been subtle. A performance review, a promotion discussion, seemingly mundane corporate interactions that carried the weight of generations of unresolved racial dynamics. Rohan wasn't just competing for a position. He was challenging an entire system. Every spreadsheet he perfected, every strategy he crafted was a quiet rebellion against centuries of marginalization. Mark saw him not as a colleague, but as a threat. Not as a professional, but as an intruder in a world he believed was exclusively his inheritance. How thin is the line between professional disagreement and pure, unfiltered hatred? How easily can years of systemic conditioning transform into violent outburst? The blood on Rohan's cheek was more than a physical mark. It was a statement, a challenge, turning point, and this was just the beginning of a story that would challenge everything everyone thought they knew about racism, redemption, and the complex landscape of corporate humanity. The roots of this conflict ran deeper than a single moment of violence. They stretched back through generations, through family histories, through unspoken narratives of struggle and survival. Rohan Mehta's journey began in a small town in Gujarat, India, a place where ambition was both a blessing and a curse. His grandfather had been a freedom fighter, his father a teacher who believed education was the ultimate weapon of social transformation. They had taught Rohan that success was not about conquering others, but about lifting entire communities. Every immigrant's story is a complex tapestry of sacrifice, resilience, and unimaginable dreams. Rohan was not just a professional. He was a walking testament to generations of hope. His path to Global Horizon Technologies had been anything but straightforward. Scholarships, late-night study sessions, moments of self-doubt that threatened to consume him, countless rejections that would have broken a lesser spirit. Mark Walker's world could not have been more different. His family's wealth was built on a foundation of generational privilege. His great-grandfather had been a powerful industrialist during a time when opportunities were reserved for a select few. Boarding schools, Ivy League connections, a network that smoothed every potential obstacle. But privilege is a double-edged sword. It creates not just advantage, but a dangerous illusion of inherent superiority. What happens when that illusion is challenged? When the carefully constructed narrative of inherited success begins to crumble? The conference room where the punch occurred was more than a physical space. It was a battlefield of ideologies. The glass walls, the sleek furniture, the meticulously arranged corporate artifacts. They were props in a much larger drama. Global Horizon Technologies prided itself on diversity statements. Glossy brochures featuring smiling faces of different ethnicities. Corporate communications that spoke about inclusion. But statements are easy. Genuine transformation is not. Rohan knew this better than anyone. His previous workplace had been a similar environment. Subtle racism masked behind professional courtesies. Promotions that always seemed just out of reach. Performance evaluations that carried an unspoken subtext. Hey, remarkable listeners. If this story is making you see the world differently, now's the perfect time to subscribe. Because true understanding comes from listening to narratives that challenge our perspectives. The punch was a culmination, not just of personal tensions, but of systemic pressures that had been building for years. Mark's rage wasn't just about Rohan. It was about a changing world. A world where traditional power structures were being dismantled. Where merit was beginning to matter more than lineage. In the weeks leading up to this moment, their interactions had been a delicate dance of professional antagonism. Subtle undermining. Strategic positioning. Each meeting, each email, each presentation was a calculated move in an intricate corporate chess game. Rohan's last presentation had been exceptional. A market strategy so brilliantly constructed that it had left the senior leadership speechless. But Mark had seen it differently. Have you ever witnessed a moment where excellence becomes threatening? Where professional brilliance is perceived as a personal attack? The strategy Rohan proposed would restructure entire market segments. It challenged long-held assumptions. It threatened established power dynamics. And Mark Walker could not allow that. His initial resistance was subtle, questioning every data point, requesting additional research, pushing back in meetings with a calculated precision that spoke of deeper motivations. But Rohan was always 3 steps ahead. Each of Mark's challenges was met with meticulously prepared counterarguments. Data, research, global market insights that left no room for traditional pushback. The tension had been building, a slow, relentless pressure that was bound to explode. And then came that moment, that single, violent instant that would change everything. The blood on Rohan's cheek was more than a physical mark. It was a symbol. A turning point in a narrative much larger than 2 individuals. Global corporate culture was watching. The world was watching. And this was just the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything. The conference room became a crucible of unspoken tensions after the punch. Mark Walker stood frozen, his hands still suspended in the air, a monument to his momentary loss of control. Rohan Mehta remained motionless, a single trail of blood tracing a crimson path down his cheek, a silent testimony to the violence that had just erupted. Violence is never just a moment. It's a revelation. The first to move was Elena Rodriguez, the head of human resources. Her steps were calculated, her eyes a mixture of professional detachment and barely concealed rage. In her 20 years of corporate experience, she had witnessed countless moments of workplace tension. But this was different. "Conference room B now," she commanded, her voice a razor-sharp instrument of corporate protocol. The executives who moments ago had been passive witnesses now scrambled. Some avoided eye contact. Others exchanged knowing glances that spoke volumes about the unspoken dynamics of power and privilege. Rohan didn't wipe the blood. He didn't react. His stillness was a form of resistance more powerful than any verbal retaliation. Mark's world was collapsing, not just professionally but personally. The mask of corporate civility had slipped, revealing the raw, ugly truth that lurked beneath. What happens when a moment of rage becomes a defining point of no return? The investigation was swift, brutal in its efficiency. Global Horizon Technologies prided itself on a zero-tolerance policy for workplace violence. But tolerance and understanding are two very different landscapes. Elena Rodriguez was a force of nature. Born to immigrant parents, she understood the delicate balance of corporate power better than most. Her file on Mark Walker began to take shape, not just as an incident report, but as a comprehensive dissection of systemic racism. Rohan's response was unexpected. Instead of filing a complaint, instead of seeking immediate retribution, he requested a private meeting. With Mark, some battles are fought not in boardrooms, but in the spaces between words, between understanding and hatred. The meeting was scheduled for 3 days later. A neutral conference room, 2 witnesses, hours of recorded conversation. But this was more than a corporate hearing. This was a confrontation with generations of unresolved racial tensions. Mark's world was unraveling. His wife, Sarah, a corporate lawyer with her own complex understanding of institutional power, was horrified. Not just by his actions, but by what those actions revealed about him. "You've destroyed everything," she had said, her voice a mix of disappointment and clinical detachment. Rohan's family watched from thousands of miles away. His mother, a retired professor of sociology, understood the broader implications. His father, who had fought silent battles of discrimination his entire academic career, saw this as another chapter in a long, painful narrative of resistance. The corporate investigation peeled back layers of Mark's history. Performance reviews, email exchanges, subtle but consistent patterns of microaggressions that had gone unchecked for years. How many moments of racism go unnoticed? How many violent impulses are masked by professional courtesies? Global Horizon Technologies found itself at a crossroads. This was more than an isolated incident. This was a moment of institutional reckoning. Leaked internal documents began to circulate. Anonymous sources within the company started sharing their experiences. A network of suppressed stories began to emerge. A complex tapestry of systemic racism that extended far beyond this single violent moment. Mark's legal team worked overtime. But this was no longer just a potential termination. This was a potential criminal investigation. Rohan remained an enigma. No public statements. No dramatic accusations. His silence was a weapon more powerful than any legal action. Some transformations begin in moments of absolute destruction. Some revelations emerge from the most violent of collisions. And this was just the beginning. The days following the incident became a pressure cooker of institutional tension. Global Horizon Technologies found itself under a microscope, not just of its own internal investigation, but of an increasingly vocal public scrutiny. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended. Professional networks buzzed with speculation and outrage. What had once been a private moment of workplace violence now became a symbol of broader systemic issues. Rohan Mehta disappeared from public view. Not out of fear, but with a calculated precision that suggested deeper strategy. Mark Walker's world continued to implode. His legal team, led by a ruthless corporate attorney named David Goldstein, worked tirelessly to mitigate the damage. But some wounds are too deep to simply be managed away. Institutional racism is not a single moment. It's a complex ecosystem of inherited prejudices, systemic barriers, and unspoken power dynamics. The first formal hearing was scheduled in a nondescript conference room on the 42nd floor of Global Horizons headquarters. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, the kind of space that promised neutrality but delivered nothing but cold, calculated judgment. Elena Rodriguez presented a dossier that was more than just a collection of documents. It was an indictment. Years of subtle interactions, email exchanges, performance reviews. Each page revealed a pattern of systemic marginalization that extended far beyond Mark Walker's single violent act. Rohan's legal representation was equally formidable. James Reyes, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for dismantling corporate racism, sat quietly. His presence alone was a statement. Some battles are won before a single word is spoken. The investigation revealed layers of complexity. Mark wasn't an isolated incident. He was a symptom of a much larger disease. A corporate culture that had long maintained a veneer of progressiveness while perpetuating deep-rooted discriminatory practices. Anonymous testimonies began to surface. Employees who had long suffered in silence found their voices. Each story added another brick to the growing wall of evidence. Rohan's silence was strategic. While the corporate world speculated, he retreated. Not in defeat, but in careful preparation. His family history became a point of intrigue. His grandfather, a freedom fighter during India's independence movement. His father, a renowned academic who had fought silent battles against systemic oppression. Rohan was carrying a legacy of resistance that extended far beyond this single corporate conflict. Mark's world continued to crumble. His professional network began to distance themselves. Connections that had seemed unbreakable suddenly became fragile. Wives of his corporate colleagues whispered. Business lunches became awkward. The old boys network that had protected him for years started to fracture. Sarah, his wife, began to see him differently. Not as the successful executive she had married, but as a man whose true nature had been exposed. Transformation is never comfortable. It's a violent process of breaking down and rebuilding. The legal proceedings became a complex dance, not just of legalities but of broader societal reckoning. Global Horizon Technologies found itself not just defending an individual, but confronting its entire corporate culture. Psychological evaluations, workplace behavior assessments. Each document peeled back another layer of systemic dysfunction. Rohan's strategy became clear. This was never about personal revenge. This was about institutional change. Evidence emerged of previous incidents. Subtle discriminatory practices that had gone unchecked for years. Performance evaluations that carried unspoken racial biases. Promotion patterns that revealed deeply entrenched systemic barriers. Some revolutions begin in the most unexpected moments. Some transformations are born from the most violent of collisions. And this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about power, privilege, and human potential. The hearing was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The final act of this corporate drama unfolded not with a thunderous revelation, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in consciousness. The hearing room became a crucible of human potential. Institutional walls that had stood for generations began to crumble under the weight of unspoken truths. Mark Walker sat broken, not just professionally but fundamentally. The man who had once represented an unassailable system of privilege now looked like a relic of a rapidly disappearing world. Rohan Mehta's strategy was never about destruction. It was about transformation. Redemption is not a destination. It's a journey of continuous unlearning and relearning. The testimonies revealed a landscape of systemic racism more complex than anyone had imagined. Each witness brought forward a piece of a larger narrative, a mosaic of pain, resilience, and potential. Elena Rodriguez emerged as an unexpected architect of change. Her report was not just an investigation but a blueprint for institutional transformation. Years of suppressed experiences found voice through her meticulous documentation. Mark's legal team fought desperately, but the evidence was overwhelming. Not just of a single act of violence, but of a pervasive culture of exclusion that had existed for decades. Some battles are won in courtrooms. Some are won in the quiet spaces of human understanding. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a moment of cross-examination, Mark broke down. Not in anger, but in a profound moment of genuine recognition. "I never saw you," he said to Rohan, his voice cracking. "I truly never saw you as a human being." Those words became more than a personal confession. They became a collective indictment of a system built on unconscious bias and inherited prejudice. Hey, incredible listeners! If this journey of transformation is touching your soul, now's the time to subscribe, because some stories have the power to change perspectives forever. Rohan's response was unexpected. Instead of seeking revenge, he proposed a radical alternative. A comprehensive diversity and inclusion program, not just for Global Horizon Technologies, but as a model for corporate America. Mandatory training, systemic review processes, transparent promotion pathways. The settlement was groundbreaking. Mark would be required to undergo extensive sensitivity training. His professional certification would be conditionally maintained, contingent on demonstrable behavioral change. But the real transformation was happening internally. Mark's wife, Sarah, became an unexpected ally in his journey of redemption, not out of blind support but as a critical partner in his process of genuine understanding. Healing is not linear. It's a complex dance of vulnerability, accountability, and genuine human connection. Global Horizon Technologies became a case study, not of punishment, but of genuine institutional transformation. Companies across the nation began to look at their own practices, their own hidden biases. Rohan's broader mission became clear. This was never about a single incident. This was about systemic change. He established a foundation focused on creating pathways for marginalized professionals, scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, a comprehensive approach to dismantling institutional barriers. Mark's journey of redemption was public and painful. Speaking engagements, community work, a documented process of genuine self-reflection and growth. The most profound revolutions happen not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of genuine human understanding. Years later, Global Horizon Technologies would be recognized as a leader in diversity and inclusion. Not because of a mandate, but because of a fundamental shift in corporate culture. And at the heart of this transformation, two individuals who had once been locked in a moment of violent confrontation, Mark and Rohan. No longer adversaries, but architects of a new understanding. Some stories are not just told. They are lived. They are transformed.